This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Business taxes. Was stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Wildcard weekend is in the books. The divisional round is almost upon us. We went 4-2 against the line, 4-2 in outright picks as well through wildcard weekend. Just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers letting us down along with the LA Chargers. But you wanted big, bold predictions. Graves on Gridiron gave you big, bold predictions. The Bills to beat the Broncos and score at least 29 points. They did that with some to spare as well. What have we got ahead for this weekend? Well, why wait? Let's turn the page and look ahead to the divisional round in the playoffs in the NFL.
Graves on Gridiron with Richard Graves.
Hello, welcome along to Graves on Gridiron. I'm your host, Richard Graves, and then there were just 8 teams remaining. 4 games this coming weekend. 4 teams will see their dream of appearing in Super Bowl 59 end this weekend. But one of those is going to be represented by the man that joins us on this week's preview show. If you follow the Ravens online, you'll know him as Bobby Baltimore. It's Bobby Trosset. And this is the weekend when we talk about the playoffs, Bobby. It's divisional round matchups that often bring the best out of the very best teams. And in the Ravens and the Bills, they don't get much bigger than this. This might be the game of the postseason this time around.
It's setting up like that. And if it lives up to, I was going to say the last time these two teams played, I think only people in Baltimore would be pleased with the outcome because, as you remember, Week 4 Sunday Night Football, it was a beatdown. So I'm not sure NFL fans across the country, across the globe, would be that pleased if it's another running back of that kind of game. But hey, Buffalo is favored by 1 as you look around the sports books right now, and I think. Look, this is a Bills team that's vastly different from Week 4. Matt Milano was not a part of that team, for example. They had several other key defensive players that were not available that night due to injury, and they hadn't yet acquired Amari in the deadline acquisition in November. So, that's a part of the equation as well. You can also go to the Ravens side of things and say, well, they were the 32nd ranked passing defense at that point in the year. So it goes both ways. I'm expecting this one to be an instant classic. And what more could you possibly want? The 2 front-runner candidates for MVP, 2 of the top teams in the entire league, if not the top 2. And there's going to be some gnarly weather in January in Western New York. And I can speak to that. I'm an upstate New York native. This is Western New York. It's going to be gnarly, but that's going to lead to the spectacle that it is. It's
funny you should say that, but because just before we started recording, I did take a quick peek at the long-range forecast for Buffalo this Sunday. The weather, it's got to be said, is pretty good for upstate New York this time of year, but there is just a hint right now. There may be snow in the air come game time, and that would just add to the magic, the atmosphere of this divisional round match.
No question about it. And as Lamar continues to just debunk and shed every single narrative and label that's been attached to him since the moment he came into this league, really prior to coming into the NFL, because a lot of that followed him during his time at Louisville. One that's following him right now, can he play consistently good football in cold weather games? And that remains to be seen. We've seen it in a small sample size, but you go back to the last time these two teams played, which was January of 2021, in this same round, the Divisional, which was in Buffalo. It didn't end well for him on a number of levels, both performance-wise and also physically. He was knocked out of that game with a concussion after an errant snap backed him up in his own end zone. And so obviously all of Ravens Nation hoping and knocking on wood that this one does not go in that direction whatsoever. And quite honestly, the way that his offensive line has been playing throughout this year, there's nothing that suggests that things are heading in that direction whatsoever. And the way that he has extended plays, of course, has allowed his offensive line to probably perform statistically better than the eye will tell you, or better than what the stat sheet will tell you. But that is what makes Lamar Lamar. I've never seen anybody with the escapability talent that he has, and he just keeps guys in it. I was just listening to a Rashad Bateman interview before we came on to tape this, and Rashad was candid. He was like, look, this is not, you have to learn how to play with Lamar as a wide receiver. Like this is not normal. Him extending plays for seconds on seconds on seconds. You think about what he did in the first game that they played Cincinnati, that ragdoll play on Sam Hubbard, I believe. Just an unbelievable play before finding Isaiah Likely in the end zone. You think about what he did the other night to extend the play for Justice Hill before dumping it off to him. It's really, he's a supreme talent. He is MV3 in my estimation. I think the Associated Press 50 distinguished media members would agree based on the way that they decided the All-Pro last week. And, of course, the NFL Players Association would probably agree as well. It's just a matter of, okay, how are we going to define value? We'll figure that out coming up the first week of February in New Orleans.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this matchup, isn't it? And I guess on both sides of the ball, both defenses, this is what you've got to be alive to in this matchup. You've just described Lamar Jackson there perfectly this season. No play is ever dead. And then last weekend, we saw that play made by Josh Allen against the Denver Broncos. It's a tight game at that point, and he keeps the play alive far longer than he should do, and somehow finds a receiver at the back of the end zone, scores the touchdown, the Bills pull away, and the rest is history. And that is what, certainly if you're neutral, that is what excites you about this matchup.
Oh, Josh just has this uncanny ability based on his measurables, based on his precision, based on his mobility, so on and so forth. I think that's what makes this so much fun. They're draft classmates, Richard. You know that from 2018. And the amount that wrote these guys off in different capacities throughout their pre-draft process, throughout their beginning of time getting into the NFL, to look at where they are right now. I mean, statistically, they outperformed Patrick Mahomes this season. And now, of course, who's got the best record? Laughing at everybody trying to go for a three-peat. Okay, that's Mahomes in Kansas City, obviously on another level, and he doesn't necessarily need any more hardware than he's already garnered over the last several years. But yeah, I think part of you wonders. It's like, wow, this is a divisional round matchup. This kind of feels like it should be an opportunity to play for the Super Bowl. But I think that just speaks to the AFC. It speaks to how seeding worked out this year, and obviously the Ravens scuffled at the midway point. Their first 10 weeks, they were very subpar, and a lot of that was due to lack of discipline from a penalty standpoint. A lot of that had to do with the passing defense. They made significant personnel changes after Week 10, including benching Marcus Williams, who's the third highest cap hit member of this team. His future is very much certain, meaning not in the, I don't know where he's going to end up in the NFL, but in terms of his Baltimore future, he will not be with the Ravens this upcoming season, 2025. And then they waived Eddie Jackson, who was sort of their latter free agency signing at the safety position. He really struggled when he was out there, particularly when it comes to kind of the desire to tackle, the desire to put his body on the line. Dropped a couple, simple breadbasket picks in their loss to Cleveland earlier on in the season. That's what's crazy. This Ravens team, Richard, yes, they went on a run down the stretch, but early on, people forget they lost to Vegas in Week 2, and they lost to Cleveland with Jameis Winston after Deshaun Watson had the season-ending procedure. So it's been a roller coaster of a season, but as they say, don't peak too soon, and the Ravens certainly did not do that. They come into this game having ripped off 5 straight wins since that bye week, since Lamar's mother, Felicia Jones, cussed him out for not running enough in that Philadelphia loss on December 1st. And quite honestly, Zay Flowers aside, who will have a chance to play this upcoming weekend, they are very healthy. I love where they are going into the divisional round. I really do.
Yeah, of course, a lot of talk about Derrick Henry and the impact he's had on this team this season, over 1,900 rushing yards. We saw it again last weekend in the wild card game, how he can just take over games. He has that game-changing playmaking ability. But it's the effect on Lamar Jackson that really intrigues me. This is a back-and-forth debate you and I have had previously when we've discussed the Ravens. And the knock on Lamar Jackson in games gone by has been, in the big moment, in a big game, can he make the throw? Well, this season, you look at the bare statistics, 41 TDs, just 4 interceptions. And even last weekend, only 5 incompletions in the game. How much better do you feel Lamar Jackson is because of that free agency move that the Ravens made for Derrick Henry?
It certainly didn't hurt, but I would go on record to maybe say a hot take based on the circles and with the MVP conversation and dialogue would deem this to be, that I think Lamar and his presence means more to Derrick, to be quite frank. That's not to say that Derrick, of course, hasn't opened up a ton of opportunities throughout the last 18 weeks for Lamar. But I tell you what, I've been covering this team and Lamar since his rookie year. I can think of running backs who were over the hill, so to speak, that when the Ravens had issues in their backfield health-wise, whether it was J.K. going down, Gus Edwards, so on and so forth, names like Latavius Murray, names like, oh my gosh, Melvin Gordon kind of had a cup of coffee here. Kenyon Drake comes to mind. Oh gosh, remind me the former Pittsburgh Steeler who went into box a couple years ago. He's Le'Veon Bell. I mean, there are names, Richard, that have come through here throughout the Lamar era, and I don't want to say like excelled, but were moving the needle for the Ravens. And I think that has everything to do with being in Lamar's backfield. The amount that opposing defenses have to account for when you add Lamar into the equation, and now you mention those numbers, that he's a precision passer. He is winning with his arm first. He wants to beat you with his arm first. But oh, by the way, he's going to chip in an additional 800 plus rushing yards. It's amazing. Yeah. So to get back to your question, Derrick at 31 is a de-aging first ballot Hall of Famer, somebody who is ascending at 31. It's exceptional. His yards after contact is out of this world. He finished with over 1,900, to your point earlier on. And so, of course, those two in the option game and the pull and push and everything that they do in the backfield is second to none when you look around the league. With that said, Lamar has done this before. He's done it again with the King, but obviously the King doesn't exactly come around every so often when it comes to pure talent. So it's a duo that I think we'll talk about for a very long time. He is under contract for 1 more year. And don't be surprised if they go on a run here, and maybe even if they don't go on a run, maybe Eric DeCosta gets out in front. Hey, let's kind of rework this deal. Let's make sure you're in Baltimore for a couple more years besides just 2025, because it's been that electric.
Yeah, if you're an opposing defense, that is not a line you want to be hearing coming out of Baltimore, especially given the way the two of them have meshed up this season. Okay, let's break it down then, this matchup. What are you guys out there in Baltimore discussing in the build-up to this game? What fears you the most? What do you feel that Baltimore have to do on Sunday if they're to beat a team which, as it stands right now, have a 100% record? They are 9-0 when playing in Buffalo this season.
Yeah, I saw that statistic as well. Obviously, it's a home field advantage and then some when you think about Bills Mafia, when you think about that stadium, when you think about the gnarly weather that it comes with, so on and so forth. This is going to be a battle. Both teams are battle-tested. The Ravens will be, to the nth degree, battle-tested if they can walk away from this game victorious. Look, Richard, I kind of feel maybe this is the low-hanging fruit, but this kind of is feeling like a potential shootout coming up, weather permitting. If it starts to snow, obviously, and this becomes a run game.
Yeah,
exactly. Like we'll see if the weather changes between now and game time. But to me, this has shootout written all over it. And from a Ravens perspective, look, I don't think they're going to have any problem putting up points against Buffalo. And again, I know it. I know Bills fans are out there right now saying, just think about who they were without defensively. And I mentioned that earlier on in the show, right? I mentioned the names like Matt Milano and I had the whole list right here. Yeah, Terrell Bernard and Taron Johnson. They were all unavailable the first time around. All key pieces for Buffalo's defense. Aside from that, you had Amari Cooper, who hadn't joined the team yet as well, like we mentioned earlier on in the show. With that said, I still don't think that the Ravens will have any trouble whatsoever putting up points. Where they could get into this shootout situation is Josh's ability to connect with Keon Coleman, to connect with Khalil Shakir. And I think there's going to be one player who has a big target on his back, because we've seen this week in and week out, and that is Brandon Stephens, who's in the middle of a contract year. He was drafted as a safety. He was a former college running back, so he's had a successful conversion, so to speak. But he's been playing corner this year for the Ravens, and he's been getting picked on. And he's got some ball skill issues that he's been working through. Now, again, I don't want to overreact here, because Brandon, the sheer amount of volume, because people have seen on tape that he is the weak link, the volume almost kind of inflates this conversation a little bit. But at the same time, you cannot deny the fact that Brandon is consistently the one finding himself in situations where not only is he being targeted, but he's being taken advantage of. And there's times where, okay, nobody ever questions whether or not he's sticky. Nobody ever questions whether or not he's willing and able to run with you stride for stride. It's ball awareness, ball skills, and spatial awareness that have come back to bite him this year. And it's unfortunate, too, because I mentioned this is a contract year for him, and he's coming off a career season and a breakout year from 2023. So I expect that to be an area where Josh will try to exploit. It's going to be key to get safety coverage help when possible from Ardarius Washington and or Kyle Hamilton. They were late to the party, or there was miscommunication breakdowns in that wild card round on a couple touchdowns. One from Van Jefferson, the other was George Pickens on the right-hand side. And so that and actually, I don't believe Stephens was in on that one. I think I'm actually referring to Nate Wiggins on the right-hand side. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm expecting a shootout, and I'm expecting if the Ravens can find a way to shore things up on the back end and stay consistent with their coverages, I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout, but I do think that the Ravens will run away with this game.
That's interesting to hear, because I was looking at it and going back and forth earlier today. And ultimately, what decides it for me is stats. Stats don't lie. And whilst I love the Buffalo story, the atmosphere, it's one of the last times that we're playing a playoff game in Orchard Park with the new stadium now going up very quickly. And obviously, everybody knows the history of 4 straight Super Bowl defeats. As much as Josh Allen, I think, has also got better this season and has improved and carries this team at times on his back, the fact remains that on paper, and as the season's gone on, the Ravens seem to have the bigger playmakers, the more consistent playmakers. And I mentioned it earlier, Lamar Jackson, 41 regular season touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. He's not turning the ball over. And then you can just hand the ball off to juggernaut in Derrick Henry, who physically is going to wear opposing defenses down as the game goes on. So the odds makers, as you say, have it a 1-point game. I've got a feeling that the Baltimore move on here. I think they win this big game, and we're going to see them in the AFC Championship game again for the second year running.
And question becomes, where's that championship game going to be played? I think there's a lot of people
that's the problem, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are pushing, especially coming off a home game atmosphere in the wild card round against your bitter rival, and the Ravens pulling out all the stops, right, to the red carpet kind of treatment for prime time in Baltimore. What an environment it was this past weekend. I mean, it was just an exceptional game night environment. The pregame tailgate show that I host was just rabid. And so I think a lot of people are kind of pushing for that Houston upset. But obviously, first and foremost, you got to take care of business against a Bills team that's playing as hot as anybody. I mean, we all saw what they did to Denver, and that was after a slow start too, right? At halftime, you're thinking, maybe this is a game. But Josh and his ability to just extend plays, his ability to be so precise, his ability to, life after Stephon Diggs. You didn't think it would be so clean, so clean living, but it's been exactly that. They have a by committee approach, and I expect this to be an exceptional game, and maybe even one of those that we'll refer to as your classic instant classic.
Graves on Gridiron.
Well, since you mentioned the Texans and the Chiefs, let's quickly have a look at that game. What are your initial thoughts going into it?
Initial thoughts is Kansas City is ridiculously over-prepared for moments like these. They know how to handle the bye week. They know how to handle the top overall seed. They know that. They know how to handle business. It's just so familiar to them, I would think. And so with that in mind, does Houston have the firepower to keep up? Losing Tank Dell was obviously a major blow for them at the end of the year, and then the Ravens kind of took advantage of that on Christmas night. I think there may have been the hangover of that crushing blow and the way that Tank went down that kind of leaked into Christmas night in Houston. I mean, 31-2 was the final. That was a game that was just utterly dominated by the Ravens. So I'm not sure how competitive I expect Houston to be. With that said, I love a good wild card round, and I love a good wild card story. And you think about a past Ravens team. You think about the past Eli Manning Giants teams. You get hot on wild card weekend and come and surprise sort of the team that's been off for 2 weeks preparing for, the divisional round. And there's something to be said about momentum. My hope is that the Texans make it competitive. It's just Kansas City is the veteran in the room, the old and wise, and understands what this is, and obviously has the clearer picture of what it's chasing, and that is, the first ever three-peat in the history of this league. So I get the sense that Kansas City will be emerging from this game victorious. I expect it to be close, though.
Yeah, I must admit, looking at this game, as well as C.J. Stroud and the Texans rallied and handled business last weekend against the Chargers, the only real thing I can lean on for the Texans is that many of these Chiefs players haven't played a competitive snap in 24 days coming into this game. So maybe there might be a little bit of rust there, but I just can't see it with Mahomes and Andy Reid and the Chiefs. I know when they met, I think it was in this stage, was it back in 2018 or 2020? Perhaps do you remember that game where the Texans raced out to a 24-0 lead in Arrowhead, and then back came the Chiefs? Well, I don't see it being the same sort of game. I think it'll be physical. I think it'll be tight. I think it'll be relatively low scoring as well. But I'm with you. I think the Chiefs progress. I think they've just got too much. They're too good, and they know how to handle business at this stage of the season. Of the other two games, Commanders and Lions, which one's the better story coming into this?
Yeah. Well, I think the geographical convenience of being in Baltimore, I have to give it to Washington. Just the fact that this is year one of a completely revamped organization, as you know, new ownership, new head coach, new staff, new quarterback who is an absolute rookie sensation, just ran away with this year's, Rookie of the Year award for sure. And you think about the way that they're constructed too, like veterans such as Zach Ertz and Terry McLaurin and, defensive pieces that have been around in the Commanders program for years. It's hard not to love how quickly they've built this back up. And I think the Commanders faithful is just saying, well, yeah, we've been waiting for this opportunity. As soon as Dan Snyder stepped aside, look at this. What a coincidence, But if there's one thing about the Washington Commanders, and the Ravens saw them earlier in the year, they're a scrappy bunch, and I expect them to give Detroit all it can handle. But obviously the Lions feel like they're sort of a team of destiny, and I think Washington is sort of seen as a team that peaked a little bit too soon. Hey, good for them, deservedly so, with the way that they built this thing up. I will be picking Detroit in the divisional round, but Jaden Daniels is a force to be reckoned with, and I look forward to him continuing to ascend because he's got that place fired up right now. And you know, there are certain fan bases, the Jets come to mind, the Commanders are another. Despite all the dysfunction, the years and years of underperformance, they are still rabid in their love for their teams, and I got to give them a lot of credit. And when they see a little bit of winning, even if it's a little bit, look at what's going on in Washington right now. It's pandemonium.
Hey, and it's even better when you doink a game-winning field goal in as time expires as well on the road as they did last weekend. Look, the Lions, number one ranked scoring offense in the regular season, scoring over 33 points per game. You know they're going to put points on the board come what may. If we can give any hope to the Commanders, what would it be?
That they do have those veterans, you know, and they are playing with nothing to lose. You know, the fact that, I mean, it's who expected them to be here in year one. So with that in mind, I'd be playing loose and free if I'm the Commanders coming up next weekend, you know, and Jaden just seems so unflappable. He just seems like this is what he's expected to be. And it didn't exactly work out as well for his draft classmate there, did it, in year one in Chicago? But there's just something very calming about Jaden Daniels. And so I guess if that were to be it were to be, okay, nobody thought we were supposed to be here. Expectations aren't high at all. So let's just go out there and play with a certain amount of reckless abandon and see what happens. But then also they just kind of go as their quarterback goes. And Jaden he's a smooth operator, man. So I guess I would lean on that kind of savvy, even though it's an inexperienced savvy going into a hostile environment, obviously, in Detroit that has everything to play for. And obviously they expected to be in the Super Bowl last year, but had to go through heartbreak instead, which I'm sure is still very much at the top of mind out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, everybody's expecting a high-scoring game. 55.5 points, the line said on it. Ooh. Do we think we see more than that?
55.5, huh? So
it's high, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty high. You know, it's so funny in the postseason. Like, even I haven't even come up with a score prediction yet because we're taping this on Tuesday for Sunday in Buffalo. But I've told you multiple times that I kind of feel I have a hunch that it's going to be a shootout. I have no clue what to expect for Detroit and Washington. I guess I would probably go the under. But again, to say that I have a good feel for spreads in the month of January would be how about this? I felt pretty confident the Ravens would cover at 9.5 this past weekend. To say I'm confident about any of that going into divisional round weekend would just be a total lie.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to be entertained. I like entertaining football. I'll go on the over for that. And you've already told us that 1-point dogs going into Buffalo for the Ravens. They're going to blow it out the park anyway. So there's two of the games easily covered for us, Bobby. Final game, Rams-Eagles. I guess it's no surprise the Rams are heavily underdogs going into this. But after what we've seen from them in December and certainly on Monday night in the win that they enjoyed over the Minnesota Vikings, I think this is going to be a lot closer than many might first suspect.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, the fact that everybody was rerouted to Arizona, dealing with, understandably, the emotions of an extremely unique week, a trying week, given the severity of these wildfires out there in Southern California. I mean, I can't say enough about the job that the Rams just did last night. You feel for Sam Darnold. You feel for a 14-win team that had to play in the wild card weekend. But quite frankly, Sam's going to get paid. It's just a matter of by who after what he did this year. I hope that's the case because Sam Darnold, you talk about a comeback, a turnaround. I'm supposed to be here. I told you so, you know, all those types of things. Wow. He epitomized all of that. So best wishes to him. And I think Kevin O'Connell is one of, you know, I think you could probably refer to him as a top 5 head coach at this point, given the way that he commands that team and what he did to that team after losing J.J. McCarthy, his rookie. So with all of that said, the Rams playing with this emotional high and Matthew Stafford with his savvy, with his Super Bowl experience, and Sean McVay, of course, as the exquisite play caller that he is, I would put Philadelphia on upset alert. It seems as if all year long, even though you could argue that there is no more talented roster head to toe in the entire league, it always seems as if there's something going on dramatically in Philadelphia, right? whether it's AJ reading a book on the sideline, whether it's the media stuff, whether it's the head coach getting into in-game antics with fans, having to be held back, Jalen Hurts and the internal stuff between him and AJ, it's just wow. Like, is Saquon the only one over there that's not leading to all of this dysfunction? Maybe, but I know Lane Johnson is obviously there's obviously a lot of continuity over there. I'm just talking about some of the polarizing figures that have come up this year. So I would put Philadelphia. See, here's the thing: talent doesn't always take you the distance, and to me, this is a Rams team. You talk about playing with very little to lose. That's exactly where they are right now. And I would not be surprised if they knock off Philadelphia at their place.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is going to be a lot tighter. I'm not going to go so far as to say the Eagles lose this game, but I certainly think the Rams cover going into it. And I wouldn't be surprised, like you, if the Rams do pull off the shock upset, because they've got the quarterback, the coach, they've got all the energy and momentum behind them as well. Many of those players have been here and trodden this road, and they wear the T-shirt now. So that's another game I'm looking forward to. Just finally, before we wrap this up, Bobby, I know you've got big plans for Sunday. Did I see you post earlier that you plan to be outside Orchard Park live ahead of the game on Sunday?
Yeah, I'm finalizing some travel logistics right now, but my plan is to be out there doing my pregame live stream outside Highmark Stadium with my tailgate sponsor, which is Be More Around Town. That's where I did all the home games this year in Baltimore. And then after that, hey, let's see what happens. I would love to kind of go on the road the next couple of weeks to Buffalo, to Kansas City, and kind of just follow this team, because it does feel as if they are absolutely in great position for a Super Bowl opportunity. And if they get to New Orleans, it will have been earned against your bitter rival in the wild card round, against maybe the best team in the entire AFC. I know they feel like they are, in the Buffalo Bills, who you obviously would have to sweep if you were to get to the AFC Championship. Already beat them week 4, as we covered. And then, of course, we all kind of think that it's all going to be decided in Kansas City regardless. And so talk about a murderer's row to get to New Orleans. It will certainly have been earned, and I look forward to kind of following along. I'll definitely be in New Orleans. I know that. I'll be working Radio Row. I will miss you this year, but I look forward to seeing you next year. And thanks for having me on, Richard.
Now, it's a pleasure as always. And just one final question, Bobby. This time last year, we went to Vegas, and you gladly gave your time to us as we looked ahead to the Super Bowl. But we spoke off camera, and you were genuinely gutted like many other Ravens fans. You thought you were going to be in the big dance. So here we go, 5 days out from the biggest game of divisional weekend. What are you now? Nervous? Are you anticipating? Are you excited? Or at the moment, have you been down this road before and you're wise enough, old enough just to be relaxed and take it all in?
Yeah, typically the latter. I consider myself sort of just a broadcaster that follows the team. I try not to lose sleep over wins or losses, and that was certainly the case last year. That said, if I were to put my shoes in that of a fan's, I'm probably extremely anxious. I'm nervously optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but understanding that they have those calluses from last year. They understand that, and I think that there is just such a bigger fish to fry in the Ravens' minds, and they go as Lamar goes. And all year long, he has been so incredibly consistent with his approach. He's been steadfast. He's been so steady. And I think that has a contagious effect. It trickles down all throughout the locker room. They go as he goes. And so it really is a one game at a time approach. They've essentially said that after big wins and crushing losses every single time this year. So I do think that has a legitimate impact and effect on your team. And so I guess I'm just more so fired up than anything else, because this is the matchup that everybody's going to be watching. It is prime time. It is the CBS A team with Jim, Tony, and Tracy. And so bring it on. Let's do it.
Bring it on. Let's do it. Absolutely. Bobby, pleasure as always. Thanks for your time. And if this is the Ravens' year and you guys are going to New Orleans, then let's catch up in the week leading up to the Super Bowl and get a flavor for what everybody's anticipating then as well.
All right, my friend. I look forward to it. Here it is. Best of luck. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Graves on Gridiron.
Many thanks to Bobby Trosset as he helped us look ahead towards that huge AFC Divisional Round clash in Buffalo. The Bills against the Ravens, the climax of the Divisional Round this weekend. If you want to catch up more with Bobby, then you can go to his YouTube channel, Bobby Baltimore there, and he's on social media platforms, X and Instagram as well. Just to recap once again, the 4 games going into this weekend kicks off Saturday evening UK time with the Texans at the Chiefs. The total points line for that is 42.5. I'm taking the under in that game. I think it's going to be a close, hard, physical battle. The Chiefs will win it, but it'll be under 42.5 points in the game. From Kansas City, we're on to Detroit as the Lions enter the playoffs this year. They host the Washington Commanders, fresh off a huge win, a huge emotional win on the road last weekend. The line for this is 55.5 total points. The odds makers expect points galore. The Lions at home, I cannot see anything but points being scored this weekend. The Lions, I'm sure, will win this one outright, but take a combined total points of over 55.5. Then it's on to Sunday. The Rams, on a short week, having won on Monday night, now go to the city of brotherly love to take on the Eagles. The Eagles start this game as 6-point favorites. I'm just not seeing enough out of their offense right now. They beat the Rams earlier in the season over in LA. I think the LA Rams are a much different side going into this one. I'm going to take the Eagles still to progress and win this one outright, but at 6-point dogs, I think the Rams cover at +6. And then we finish up with the game of the weekend, the Ravens and the Bills in Buffalo. The winners of this meet the winners of Kansas City or Houston. The odds makers can't decide between them. Not put a slip of paper. They have the Ravens as 1-point underdogs going into this one. The Bills are undefeated. They have a perfect record when playing at home this season. I think that comes to an end this weekend. I think it'll be heartbreak for Josh Allen and the Bills. So take the Ravens to win, and in doing so, cover the spread at +1. As I always mention, it's about having fun first and foremost. Keep that in mind when you're enjoying the games this weekend. If you want to read more about the 4 games, then go to my website, www.rdgmedia.uk. Click on the Talking Sport app, and there you will see NFL Overcoming the Odds Divisional Round Preview. All 4 games are spoken about there. Equally, hit me up on X, @RichardGraves1. On Instagram, it's RDG Media UK. Wherever you are, whatever you want to do, then get in touch. On Facebook, it's Richard Graves RDG Media. I love discussing the NFL with you guys, and certainly at this stage of the season, there's no better time to discuss what might make games, who might break games open. We'll find out this weekend. Next weekend, we'll be down to 4 teams, but which 4? Thanks for joining us, and have a good week, everybody.
Subscribe to Graves on Gridiron wherever you listen to podcasts, and keep up to date with the latest on Twitter. Search for Richard Graves 1. That's Richard Graves, the number 1.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.